What's going on, everybody? Matt Gajeski here, back again with the Stokastic channel, and we're here to talk some college football DFS. My favorite day of the year. I'd probably say that 4 or 5 times a year, but this is legitimately one of them. It's the college football playoff semifinal, and we have 2 games in the morning to go along with it. Before we get started, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live. If you're on podcast, leave a rating and review. That helps a ton, so thank you if you've done that. And we are sponsored by No House Advantage. Thank you very much to them. If you've never heard of No House Advantage, well, first off, they have a first match deposit bonus up to $100. But what are they? Well, this is a platform where you could take advantage of some interesting player prop action. They have normal versus the house player props. That's their listed props. You're making lineups of them where you can up to 21 extra entry fee if you're able to hit all 5 correctly. But they have a unique feature called a pick'em contest where it's you versus other people in tournament style contests. You're still making lineups of player props, but you're ranking them on a confidence interval. Then if they hit, you can get up to the top of these big prize pools, and sometimes they're as high as $25,000. But more importantly, these are often overlaying. That means they're not filling, and whether they fill or not, they're still paying out full prize pools, which means you can take advantage of this and build your bankroll. Click the link in the video description below to check them out and get that first match deposit bonus up to $100. All right, let's bring you behind the glass. We have FanDuel pricing. We have DraftKings pricing. We're all set up and ready to go. And we're going to kick things off with, this is not an exaggeration, maybe the worst DFS game of all time. 31-point spread. I've been told that this is a historically low over-under for college football. The actual spread is 2.5 points in favor of Iowa. The teams that are playing this historically low total game are Kentucky and Iowa themselves. Let's start with the Kentucky side. Right away, this team stands out as... Okay, so first off, if you wanted to X out this game, I think you could. I don't think there's anything forcing you to play it. But there's a decent chance because of pricing, we end up with a one-off here or there that actually makes sense. For Kentucky, they're 129th in pace. They pass the ball 44.5% of the time. Will Levis opted out of the game. Kaya Sharon, the guy you're seeing on the screen, if you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening, you'll just hear me say it. He's the only other player that's thrown a pass this year, but it looks like they're going to go to Destin Wade, which I am very intrigued by. Destin Wade is a 4-star freshman for this team, looks to be mobile. Kaya Sharon, I mean, congrats to him for getting on the field a little bit this year, but he's a low-level 3-star prospect, didn't show anything in his starts, so I'm not really that intrigued by him. I'm glad they're moving to the 4-star freshman, and they lost their OC. I actually think this is addition by subtraction. One of the biggest talking points this year heading into the season was going from Liam Cohen at OC, who brought out an explosive Kentucky offense and turned Will Levis into the maybe top 5 draft pick he is. I don't agree with that, but is at least being talked about as a first rounder. That doesn't happen if Liam Cohen isn't the OC. Well, he's coming back next year. And in the meantime, this year in between, that was the 2022 season, they hired Rich Scangarello, who's a moron, and completely torpedoed the offense. Will Levis never ran. He finished with 107 negative rush yards this year after he was way in the positives last year. I don't know, but he's gone, which is an addition by subtraction in my opinion. So people that tell you Kentucky lost their OC should just be like, no, Rich Scangarello, that's a good thing. We do not want him anywhere near the offense. Anyway, for Destin Wade, he looks to be mobile, which has my eyes raised a little bit here. It's a pretty good quarterback slate for the most part, so I'm not sure you need to get to him. But, I mean, for GPP flyers, you're going to see ownership condense. Destin Wade could be a way to do that, and I think the mobility will be there for him. In the backfield, you're looking at Chris Rodriguez gone, opt-out, Kavasier Smoke transfer. Juton McClain has actually handled the decent workload at times this year. Rodriguez was suspended to begin the year. Kavasier has been on and off the field due to injury. So you actually have a decent workload for Juton McClain, and he's been very active as a pass catcher. He has 23 targets this year, and that's in a limited role. I think he's going to have a solid role today. The problem is Iowa's a great defense. You only have a couple opt-outs on that side of the ball. So how efficient is he going to be? I had these questions yesterday about LaQuint Allen. So if they do throw the ball to the running back position a little bit, I think you might see like a LaQuint Allen light situation, but he should have a full workload. He's 4,100. He could be the contrarian piece you pick from Kentucky. Outside of that, I think receiver is pretty clear for this team. You have a pair of 4-star freshmen in Berrien Brown and Dane Key. They're going to play here. Tavian Robinson hasn't played over the last 2 games, but I think he's going to play here tentatively. He hasn't opted out. So, I mean, Wade is going to have a full complement of skill position players here, it looks like. So this is a spot where I think that could be another reason maybe you backdoor your way into some Wade. Just he's got a pretty decent cast around him. I don't know how efficient they'll be. But last thing, if you see Tavian Robinson not play this game, I think Rashawn Lewis might tentatively be the wide receiver 3. Magwood's transferring. They also probably just go to a lot of 12 personnel. Josh Caddis and Jordan Dingle both played a lot for this team after that. And, if Tavian misses, I'm probably just going to isolate on Key and Barian Brown. To the Iowa side, this is a mess. Spencer Petras and Alex Padilla are gone for one reason or another, injury or transfer. So we move forward with a complete disaster at quarterback. They're going to be playing someone named Joey Labas, who I know almost nothing about, which is saying a lot. He was their third stringer all year, and my immediate reaction was, if you were the third stringer behind Spencer Petras and Alex Padilla, how good can you possibly be? I don't know. Allegedly, he can move around a little bit. I don't know if I buy that whatsoever. You also have the problem that Iowa's offensive line was ranked outside the top 100 in run blocking, and in pass blocking. They all had 37 sacks on the year. Both Padilla and Petras were negative rushers. I mean, I'm much more willing, I think, to take a shot on Wade than this Labas character, but he essentially functions in the same capacity. We don't know anything about either signal caller. In the backfield, they lost Gavin Williams to a transfer, so that sort of, I guess, condenses things a little bit here, but you're really seeing Caleb Johnson kind of emerge recently. I don't know how much stock I'm putting into that. He did have a couple games, 22 carries, but then he dropped down to 8. Jumped back up to 16 in the most recent game. LaShawn Williams is involved here. So it's not like it's just Caleb Johnson handling all the work by himself. Maybe worth a dart throw. He's 4,400, so he's not quite like the stone minimum like some other backs are, cheaper backs are in this slate. For reference, I'd rather play Juton McClain. I think there's more upside with him as a pass catcher. But ultimately, you're probably looking at a timeshare for these Iowa backs. In their most recent game, you had 22 snaps for Caleb Johnson, 25 for LaShawn Williams, 20 for Gavin Williams, who's no longer with the team. I think it probably just condenses to Caleb and LaShawn playing mostly 50-50. Receiving game, Sam Laporta is going to play here, which is huge. I mean, it gives him at least their quarterback at least one weapon. 4,400. He averages 7.5 targets per game. I mean, he's cheap enough where you could certainly target him. I have no issues with playing Laporta as a one-off. He's their only efficient player whatsoever. From there, you have a bunch of Iowa guys in the portal. Arlen Bruce, he's in the portal. Keegan Johnson, who's really been hurt all year, he's also in the portal. So what is this team going to do at wide receiver? It's going to be a mess. I mean, earlier in the year, we saw some walk-ons like Alec Wick play a lot. I think there's a chance that happens again here, which, I mean, Laporta is great, but now what do we do with the rest of this receiving unit? I think what we can say, Reganey should be the one. He had 11 targets in the most recent game. They're probably going to use a lot of 12 personnel with Laporta and Luke Leachy. And then Brody Brecht or Dante Vines are going to be the wide receiver 2-3. I don't feel comfortable with any of these players. I'm probably ranking them 1 Laporta, 2 Reganey, 3 Leachy. This is a horrific situation at target. Next up, we've got Kansas taking on Bama. This is low-key a pretty good game. Bama with a surprise Bryce Young and Will Anderson playing. The spread is 7 points in favor of Bama. That makes them immediately a team to target. 56 total again. We'll start with the Kansas State side. 50th in pace. They're 24.5 implied team totals, nearly 10 points better than both Kentucky and Iowa here. Adrian Martinez will be active, but Will Howard will draw the start. I'd be very worried about them both playing in this game, but Will Howard may play the whole time. He only has 45 rushing yards in the year, averages 237 as a passer. I'd rather have Martinez start and play the whole game because you're getting so much more as a rusher. But I think both probably play here, and that's a mess. Deuce Vaughn hasn't opted out, which is a big surprise to me. This is probably a pay up for running back slate if we could guarantee Vaughn has the full workload. But again, I'm worried that you have Mo Ibrahim situations here. And I mean, Mo Ibrahim was a bit unique in that he was breaking records, But I mean, Deuce Vaughn has absolutely nothing to play for here. So does he play the whole game or not? If he does, 110 rush yards per game, amazing pass catcher, almost 30 yards per game through the air. He has a 17% target share. It's incredible. Deuce Vaughn's a great price adjusted play. If he's out, DJ Giddens would be an awesome play here. Giddens already averages about 7 touches per game, hyper efficient. He's a bigger back too, so he kind of is a different skill set. But I'd be looking to get Giddens for sure in that instance. He'd be probably the best price adjusted running back play on the slate. Receiver Malik Knowles is expected to play in this game. He got hurt really early on in that Big 12 championship. But there's really no question here what Kansas State's 3 receiver rotation is. It's Malik Knowles, Phillip Brooks, and Cade Warner. That's the order they're targeted in. That's the order of their routes, and that's the order of their price. Cade Warner did have 10 targets in the most recent game, so if you're looking for a cheap guy, I think he's fine. But ultimately, I think all 3 are efficiently priced, and I think you could use one of them as a run back for Alabama stacks, maybe as a one-off here. No issues with that. At tight end, it's mostly Ben Sano. He had a pretty good game in that Big 12 championship here, too. He's also just dominated Sammy Wheeler in terms of routes recently, up at 90% in 4 straight games. So you could certainly look to him, Ben Sano, as a very cheap option here, and I'll likely be doing that in some lineups at 3,700. For Bama, they're 56th in pace, 51.5% pass rate. Bryce Young is back. He averaged 273 yards per game. Gives you 195 as a rusher too, which is pretty good. He's 8,500, but there's just a lot of security with Bryce Young here. And we don't have a lot of other signal callers on the slate that can say that. I think you've got Stroud, Young, and then Doug. Outside of that, pretty risky. So Young should immediately stand out as one of the top guys to get to. Stacking him's tough, but we'll talk about that in a second. In the backfield, it looks like Jahmyr Gibbs is going to play. I have the same concerns with Gibbs that I do for Deuce Vaughn. Does he play the whole game? I don't know. He's never been to a bowl game, so he says this is important to him. If he plays the whole game, I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs had a 13% target share, finished with 34 receiving yards per game, 77 as a rusher. He's another excellent play. And then Bama does have some transfers in the backfield. You are losing Trey Sanders, but you still have Trayshawn Holden. Excuse me, not Trayshawn Holden. You still have Jace McClellan and Roydell Williams there. They should handle change of pace work. This has never been a full-blown bell cow workload for Gibbs anyway. Similar to Clemson, where they have Shipley and Phil Maffa. McClellan and Roydell are going to get a bit of work here as well. Let's talk about Trayshawn Holden now, and let's talk about these receivers that are gone, because there's a slew of them that are going to miss this game. Trayshawn Holden, transfer. JoJo Earl, transfer. Christian Leary, transfer. A couple other very ancillary pieces, and Aaron Anderson, transfer. So what does this leave? I mean, it's a complete mess. At the top, you do have the top 2 targets still there in Ja'Cory Brooks and Jermaine Burton. I think Ja'Cory Brooks should be the clear number 1. Most efficient by far. Jermaine Burton's actually been horribly inefficient this year from a routes run perspective. He's awful, but at least he's played. So you have the top 2 weapons for Bryce Young there. Cam Latu is expected to play in this game, which is surprising as well. Tight end who can go to the league. For a price-adjusted play, I think he's the most consistent, assuming he plays. Again, you have to really assume here. And then Isaiah Bond. He should play a ton without Earl and everybody we mentioned. I think this is a spot where he plays a lot. I mean, Kobe Prentice is a name to mention here. It's going to be weird to see what Alabama actually looks like from an on-field perspective at receiver. Again, the opt-outs we have, they're actually all transfers, are Holden, Leary, Earl, and Anderson. So ranking the receivers, excluding Latu, 1 Brooks, 2 Burton. I think Bond might be 3, Prentice 4, and then Kendrick Law would be 5. From a routes run perspective, we'll go to their last game. It's noisy because all those players we mentioned were still there, but Ja'Cory Brooks was at 49%. Egregious. Jermaine Burton was at 77. That's egregious in the other way. And then Holden was at 20. He's the guy that's been benched this year after poor play. Isaiah Bond popped up to 49%, and Kendrick Law popped up to 43. So maybe you do play Kendrick Law and Isaiah Bond over Trayshawn Holden just because of how bad he's been. It's tough. Actually, over Kobe Prentice, who's been really bad. Holden's the transfer. But Prentice, he's been below 30% of the routes in 3 of the last 4 games. Very difficult situation overall. Hope that makes sense. If you have a question, leave a comment. Again, I'll just go through the rank one more time. Brooks 1 for me. Burton 2. Latu is right there with these guys. And then I think it's really close between Prentice, Bond, and Kendrick Law. Looking at the routes, I think I'd honestly rather save the money. You save about $1,000 by going to Bond and Kendrick Law over Kobe Prentice. All right, the college football playoff. First game we'll talk about is Michigan TCU. 7.5-point spread in favor of Michigan. 58 total, solid here. Michigan, we know what they're going to do. They're 123rd in pace, 38th in they have a 38% pass rate. JJ McCarthy is a game manager, signal caller here. DraftKings always prices him cheap enough to entice us. FanDuel is a bit too expensive for my liking. 254 rush yards. I mean, we saw the upside against Ohio State in the most recent game. TCU is great corner play, which is going to be tough here. Hodges Tomlinson and so forth. And generally speaking, I'm betting against McCarthy because of the offense. Slow, run heavy. He needs big plays. Backfield, he's way too cheap. He should be like $9K. He had 25 carries in the most recent game. He's an awesome pass catcher too. Only 4 targets combined over the last 2 games. We've seen him play that third down role in previous years. He's one of the best players on the slate, and he should probably see between 25 and 30 touches. A big issue with DraftKings is they don't understand players in the player pool. The backup running back looks like it's going to be Khalil Mulling. I thought it was going to be CJ Stokes or Isaiah Gash or Tavier Dunlap, but they flat out just took Mullings, who previously played running back but has played defense this year. And Michigan moved him back to running back in the Big Ten championship, and he saw 8 carries. Mullings is a dynamic athlete. He threw a pass in the game too, but DraftKings doesn't have him in the player pool. And on FanDuel, he's certainly live for just a change of pace back. I mean, at 5K, if he gets 8 carries again, that could be something you look at. And for those of you behind the scenes, the reason DraftKings doesn't have him in the player pool is because Michigan lists him as a linebacker. We'll see this with Trayanum too, but DraftKings list their players based on what the team lists them as. So we've seen this before, like Jordan Moore for Duke. Duke lists him as a QB. DraftKings lists him as a QB. We saw this issue with Virginia a while back. I believe Billy Kemp was listed as a quarterback or something. I don't know. We see these mispricings or mislabelings. DraftKings isn't doing it themselves. They do it based on whatever the team does. So we can complain as much as we want. I have no idea if he'll get added to the player pool. FanDuel, he's there, though. He's the backup, I think. Receiver, Ronnie Bell should be the one here. It's tough to trust any of these guys, but Ronnie Bell is a 28% target share. 58 yards per game for him is solid. He hasn't seen more than 8 targets in any individual game, but I think he's fine. Cornelius Johnson and Rowan Wilson round out the 3 wide receiver sets for this team. You see a couple guys on and off the field occasionally, but it's fairly set for this team. Last game, Ronnie Bell, 90% of routes. Cornelius Johnson, 95. Roman Wilson was at 50. He split not just with, like Angelo Anthony and AJ Henning, but Michigan will run some 12 personnel. Luke Schoonmaker, 75% of routes. Colson Loveland, 45. Colson Loveland went out early in that game with an injury, expected to play here, but Schoonmaker was the starter all season long. I would expect Schoonmaker to retain this role. He has the second most targets on the team and is a good price-adjusted value. TCU side, Max Duggan and company. They rank 38th in pace, 46% pass rate. He should be healthier here. 404 rush yards on the year, some of the best mobility on this slate. And then he averaged 255.5 passing yards per game on just 28 attempts. Incredible efficiency for Duggan. He stands out as one of the better quarterback plays, even with a tough matchup here. Just not very many alternatives. In the backfield, Kendry Miller, when the chips need to go down, they will use him a ton. He was also banged up down the stretch. 18 touches per game, average 103 rush yards per game, average another 9 receiving yards. I would be surprised if his touches don't get close to 20 here. He's a solid play. Amari Demarcado is just a change of pace. In the receiving game, should be fully healthy here. Quentin Johnson called himself close to 100%. Clear target alpha when healthy, which he has not been through most of the year. They'll rotate their other receivers on and off the field a bit. You have kind of differing skill sets. Darius Davis is a burner. Tay Barber's there. Their routes are both at 64% and 66%. Savion Williams started for most of the year, but his routes have taken a hit recently, 50% and 48%. He'll be on the field a lot. Jordan Hudson, 36% route rate. They'll use a couple tight ends in like Jorquavius Spivey, who's kind of just a big receiver. There's Jared Wiley. He is about a 50% route rate on the year, thereabouts. Sometimes it hovers around 30 to 50. But you can tell they're deep at receiver. It's just not the most consistent position for them. Ranking them, number 1 is Johnston for me. Number 2 is going to be Tay Barber, just based on efficiency and targets. 3 would be Davis. 4 would be Savion Williams. Last game, Georgia, Ohio State, 63 totals, 6.5 point spread in favor of Georgia, which is kind of surprising considering how slow both these teams are. Just very efficient on offense. Georgia, 116th in pace, 46.5% pass rate. Ohio State, 100th in pace, 47% pass rate. Stetson Bennett always projects fairly well. He does have mobility, 184 yards there, averages 264 as a passer on 30.5 attempts. Ohio State has shown massive cracks in their secondary at times, Michigan being one of those times. So Stetson, I think, solid contrarian play. He has multiple ways to get there. The backfield's a mess. It's a 4-way committee, even in competitive games. Kenny McIntosh leads the way. Daiwan Edwards is right behind him. McIntosh is the pass catcher. He's a bit too expensive for my liking, but you could definitely see him pop off for a big game. He had 17 touches in their most recent affair, which is his ceiling, in my opinion. Edwards, he had 12 carries, but you're not going to see a lot of targets from him. Then Milton and Branson Robinson will handle whatever's left. If you're playing those guys, I'd rather just play Edwards. For the receivers, it's Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers leading the way here. That's the number 1 receiver and number 1 tight end. They're essentially the same play volume-wise, 72 targets for McConkey, 70 for Bowers. Bowers being more efficient, I'd rather get to him. And they will use him in the run game sometimes. Like Bowers has an incredible role when they need to play him. They use 12 personnel a lot. That throws Darnell Washington onto the field for about 50% of the routes. I mean, it's a good role for Darnell Washington. He creates so many mismatches being 6'7", 270 pounds, and as athletic as he is, his route rate in their most recent game was 50%. It kind of hovers between 50 and 65% on a week-to-week basis. And then from there, the wide receiver 2, 3, 4 is going to be a rotation. Most recently, Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint, 60% of the routes. Kyrus Jackson, 23%. Dylan Bell, 30%. Dominic Blaylock, 17%. Adonai Mitchell was back from injury in the last game, 37% route rate. Rosemy-Jacksaint's your best bet, but it's going to be a rotation behind Ladd McConkey for that wide receiver 2, 3 spot, depending on their formation. Going to Ohio State, CJ Stroud, probably the safest signal caller on the board, even though he doesn't run. 74 yards per on the year, not per game. As a passer, 278 per game on just 29.7 attempts. So really efficient still. In the backfield, Trevion Henderson is out of this game. Mayan Williams has been sick to start the week, but he's fully expected to play. He should be the number 1 when fully healthy here. Saw 8 carries in the most recent game. But you also have Dallin Hayden, who had that amazing game against, forget who it was, but had 27 carries. I think he's the 2 tentatively. It might be closer than we think between Williams and Dallin Hayden. Whatever it is, we know it's close. And then Chip Trayanum, it's the same issue as Mullings for Michigan. He's listed as a linebacker on Ohio State's website. So DraftKings doesn't include him in the player pool. FanDuel does. If everyone's healthy here, Mayan should be 1, Hayden should be 2, Chip Trayanum should be 3, but you probably see a little bit of work for all of them, but it's going to be in that order, I would guess. Receiver, still no Smith and Jigba. I mean, him and Trevion Henderson being out is big for Ohio State, but you still have plenty of production. Smith and Jigba's barely played this year. Marvin Harrison, 8,100. Emeka Ibuka, 7,500. Both incredibly efficient. Probably just saving the money with Ibuka if I need to pick one of them, but ultimately I'm going to try to play a lot of both here. Not any holes to poke. 29 and nearly a 30% target share for Harrison and 27% for Ibuka. They're both solid. Julian Fleming is your cheaper wide receiver 3. He doesn't really rotate on and off the field much, so I'm fine with Fleming here. He has moderate target volume. It's not going to be crazy. You probably need a score from him. But for double stacks in Ohio State, you can definitely get there. Fleming was at 90% of the routes last week. No issues at all. Tight end, this is going to be Cade Stover. Also plays in almost every single route. Just very low upside with him. You need touchdowns with Cade Stover, which not really trying to bank on, but you absolutely could. Outside of that, there's nothing really else to talk about. Just rotational receivers here and there. But that'll do it for us. Let me know in the comment section what you think. Subscribe. Hit the thumbs up button. If you want to reach out on Twitter, I'm at Matt_Gajeski. Otherwise, we'll be back for the rest of bowl season but not much left. Make sure to catch the following videos. But until then, good luck, everybody. We'll see you next time.